Once I realized the influence that I have and that people were listening, I just couldn't stop.
I knew her father, and I tell you, she's got good genes, that I can tell you. Good genes for everything.
Kim K helping to get Alice Johnson pardoned. I think that's great. No?
Why does she seem to profit off of everybody else's culture but her own? She's Armenian. Why doesn't she? Y'all Kim K stans only ever seem to bring up the fact that she's Armenian when we call her out.
Samuel L. Jackson may have tried to warn people about Kim Kardashian years ago, but nobody wanted to hear it. When Sam questioned Kim's prison reform campaign back then, plenty of people labeled him jealous or hateful. But now, in June 2026, it is starting to look like he may have seen something that others ignored. Kim's whole "I'm becoming a lawyer so I can change lives" image is not looking nearly as strong anymore. She reportedly failed the bar exam, and now she says she is stepping back from studying for a while. The earliest she could reportedly take it again is 2027. And that is assuming she does not come up with another reason to delay it. But the criticism is not only that Kim treated law school like a temporary image project. There are deeper questions around the prison reform campaign itself. Remember the Ivan Cantu case? Kim reportedly used her platform in a way that identified an innocent man as someone on death row. He took legal action, lost the case, and was then ordered to pay her around $145,000 in attorney fees. So according to critics, Kim ended up financially benefiting after allegedly getting an innocent person's identity wrong. But by 2026, more people seem to be questioning the story behind her reform work. And critics say they should have paid attention to Samuel L. Jackson from the beginning, because he appeared to recognize the situation long before the public did. Let's look at what happened. This goes back to 2018, right after Kim helped secure the release of Alice Johnson. Suddenly, Kim was everywhere. Major outlets were presenting her as some kind of civil rights hero, a label many people felt was being handed out far too easily. And the release came through her work with Donald Trump. The same Trump who had described Black Lives Matter as a hateful movement. Yet Kim still appeared with him in the Oval Office, smiled for photographs, and received glowing coverage from the media. Samuel L. Jackson, though, did not seem impressed. During an interview, he was asked whether Kim's work with Trump on prison reform was inspiring or unbearable. Instead of choosing either answer, Sam declined to respond. He simply sat there with a look that said more than words ever could.
Can we play a quick game? Incredible or unbearable? Let's see.
Incredible or unbearable?
Kim K helping to get Alice Johnson pardoned. I think that's great. No?
Samuel seemed to understand exactly what was happening. He barely said anything, but his reaction was loud enough. The message appeared obvious. He was not about to endorse the entire situation. Still, most people ignored that moment and continued celebrating Kim's so-called activism. But jump ahead to 2026, and critics argue that Sam's reaction makes much more sense now. So let's look at why he may have given that expression in the first place. Start with the Trump connection, because that alone raised major concerns for many people. Kim Kardashian presented herself as someone fighting for Black and brown people caught in the criminal justice system, yet she chose to work closely with Trump. The same politician critics say built much of his public identity around racist messaging. The same man who publicly pushed for the execution of the Central Park Five, even after they had been wrongfully convicted. And according to critics, this was never some meaningful moral alliance between Kim and Trump. It was more of a trade. Journalist Jonathan Karl wrote in his book Tired of Winning that Trump allegedly told Kim he would issue more commutations if she used her celebrity influence to persuade football players to visit the White House. She reportedly attempted to make that happen, but the players she contacted were not interested. Then there is the Alice Johnson case itself. The public was encouraged to see it as a clear example of Kim correcting a major injustice. But critics argue that the story was more complicated. Alice Johnson was not described as an innocent person who made one minor mistake. Prosecutors said she led a multi-million-dollar drug operation involving significant amounts of cocaine. At sentencing, the judge reportedly called her a major organizer within the criminal network and said the impact on her own community had been serious. Now, some people can reasonably argue that her punishment was excessive. That is a valid conversation about sentencing and the justice system. But critics point out that Kim did not help free someone who was innocent. There may also be a reason former President Obama reportedly did not grant Alice clemency when he pardoned more than 200 other incarcerated people in 2016. And the situation became even more complicated afterward. Once Alice was released, she did not become the prison reform advocate people expected. Instead, she became closely aligned with Trump. Then, in February 2025, Trump appointed Alice as his official pardon advisor.
I fell in love with this man, with his heart for this country, with his heart to really bring America back to the form of greatness that it deserved. And that's exactly what he has done. My story is truly a Joseph story. This president right here, President Donald Trump, brought me from the prison pit to the White House.
So now Alice Johnson reportedly works inside Trump's White House, helping identify incarcerated people who may receive pardons. The woman Kim helped free is now part of the Trump administration. For critics, the optics are unbelievable. But there are other concerns surrounding Kim's prison reform work that people want to discuss. One criticism is that she inserted herself into a movement that activists and organizers had been building for decades, then managed to turn much of the attention toward herself. Another issue is the law school journey. Kim spent years telling the public she was determined to become a lawyer, while headlines often treated her like a future legal powerhouse. But when it came time to pass the bar exam, she reportedly failed and then paused the process. And critics say Samuel L. Jackson may have recognized this from the start. They believe he saw a wealthy white celebrity turning black suffering into an image campaign. They argue he understood that Kim was more interested in perception than in real justice, which is why he refused to publicly support it. Now we have to address the more uncomfortable conversation: cultural appropriation and accusations of blackfishing. Some critics argue that Kim's activism cannot be separated from the way she has built much of her career by borrowing heavily from black aesthetics while never facing the realities of being black. Professor Meredith Jones of Brunel University has written about this issue in her research. She argued that Kim spent years experimenting with racial ambiguity and adopting features commonly associated with black women, including certain hairstyles, fuller lips, and caviar body proportions. The argument is that Kim uses her wealth and whiteness to move through what Jones describes as racial mobility. In simple terms, critics say she can adopt blackness when it is stylish, profitable, or culturally valuable, then leave it behind whenever it no longer benefits her. Think about the accusations that have followed her for much of her career: braids, cornrows, lip fillers, grills, BBLs, spray tans. Critics say she has spent years presenting herself with features and styles associated with women of color while remaining a white woman who can step away from those aesthetics whenever she chooses. And for people who argue Kim is Armenian, so she is not white, critics say that response misses the larger issue. Race in America has never been only about biology. It is largely a social system, and the definition of who has been accepted as white has shifted repeatedly depending on politics and power. Irish and Italian immigrants, for example, were not always treated as white when they first arrived in the United States. Over time, they became included in that category. Armenian identity has also been handled differently by American institutions depending on the era and the context. Even today, census categories often create confusion, with Armenians sometimes classified as white and sometimes discussed alongside Middle Eastern identities. So critics argue that the question is not simply about geography or ancestry. It is about access to white privilege. And Kim Kardashian, a billionaire who has not publicly lived through systemic anti-black racism, unquestionably benefits from that privilege. Critics say she profits from black aesthetics without carrying the consequences that black women experience. She can enjoy the style, the attention, and the cultural relevance, without facing the discrimination tied to actually being black. But critics say this goes beyond appearance. They also point to Kim's history with black men throughout her career. Some people even call it the Kardashian curse. Start with Ray J. He has claimed for years that Kim and Kris knew far more about the release of their sex tape than the public was led to believe. He filed a lawsuit alleging that they spent years pushing the story that the tape was released against Kim's wishes. Then, in 2023, Kim and Kris reportedly paid Ray J around $6 million as part of an agreement that prevented him from discussing the situation publicly. The agreement was reportedly signed by both sides. But after Kim later mentioned the tape on her show, Ray J claimed she violated that deal. He is now suing again and has made allegations involving possible serious federal wrongdoing.
Rico though, on KK and Kris. Ooh. The federal Rico I'm about to drop on Kris and Kim is about to be crazy.
Then there is Kanye West. Before Kanye entered the picture, Kim was often treated like a joke in fashion circles. People mainly saw her as Paris Hilton's friend who became famous after a private tape. But Kanye changed the way the public viewed her. He dressed her, influenced her style, gave her fashion credibility, and helped move her from reality television headlines to major magazine covers. People can say whatever they want about Kanye, but critics argue that Kim used his cultural influence to strengthen her brand. But when Kanye experienced a public mental health crisis and became difficult to manage, critics say Kim quickly separated herself from him while keeping much of the elevated status he helped create. Some people make a similar argument about Kylie Jenner and Travis Scott. Kylie was also accused of blackfishing for years, much like Kim. She dated several rappers, had a child with Travis, and built an image that critics say leaned heavily into black culture. But now that she is reportedly dating Timothée Chalamet, people say she has shifted into a more traditional, polished, trad wife image. At the same time, critics accuse her of treating her mixed-race children like luxury accessories. They argue that this pattern has existed across the Kardashian-Jenner family for years. Look at Kendall Jenner. During the period when she dated black NBA players, she wore cornrows and leaned into styles connected to black culture. Then, during her Bad Bunny era, critics accused her of adopting a Mexican-inspired image while promoting her tequila company. Now, with her current relationship, she appears to have moved back toward an old money, quiet luxury presentation. According to critics, the pattern is obvious. They say Kardashian women date black men for cultural relevance, have mixed-race children who become part of the brand image, profit from black aesthetics, and then distance themselves once the relationship becomes inconvenient or the man becomes a public liability. They argue that the women return to a more traditionally white image whenever it suits them. That is why critics find it difficult to accept Kim Kardashian as the face of prison reform or as a savior figure for black people trapped in the justice system. Maybe that image worked during Trump's first term, but in 2026, critics believe far more people are looking at the full record. And they argue Kim's carefully built empire is beginning to crack. Samuel L. Jackson may have tried to warn people years ago, and perhaps they should have taken him more seriously. But what do you think? What is your opinion on Kim Kardashian's prison reform work? And do you believe the Kardashian era is finally coming to an end? Share your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned for the next video.